So thank you so much for coming on today to talk to me. I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself and what you do, and we'll then get chatting.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you. So I'm Juliet Schalker. I think those of you who know me off LinkedIn or have watched one of my podcasts before will know that I always start by explaining how to pronounce my surname because it is unusual and I get called all sorts of things from Schalker to Shaka, but it's actually pronounced Skulker, like skulking around in the bushes, which is one of the first things I said to my husband when I met him. I was like, so it's like skulking around in the bushes, and jokes on me because 20 years later I share the same surname. So it's Juliet Schalker, originally from South Africa, but I've been over here for more than half of my adult life. I'm not going to tell you how long that is. Yes, it's only 5 years. No, I'm joking. It is longer than that.
Child
And
bride.
I am child bride, obviously. Um, I'm based out in Hertfordshire at a fabulous full practice law firm called Debenhams Ottaway Solicitors. We've been in Hertfordshire for 250 years plus, so we have a very, very proud heritage. And I am lucky enough to head up the dispute resolution and insolvency team here, which I'm very, very proud of because I am the first woman to do that in the firm's history. But we are 60% women in the partnership and 70% women in my team. So I feel very, very lucky to be in a female majority leadership firm. And I have a fantastic team that I get to work with. I tend to call them my city or big firm refugees because most of us have done our time in one of the big national firms or in London. We're only 20 minutes outside of London and are now looking for something different. So whether it's a cultural change or more support with work-life balance, or like me, I have a young family, and that commute into London and back every day is just not viable for me, notwithstanding hybrid working. I have a fantastic team who want to do something different, but bring that city quality expertise, that big firm expertise with them. So what do we do on a day-to-day basis? About 50% of our practice is commercial litigation. What does that mean? That means businesses having problems, business to business problems, or problems with individuals within the business. So boardroom disputes tend to be our bread and butter work. Boardroom disputes is either falling out between directors or directors and shareholders, falling out, company divorces, that sort of thing. It is contractual disputes, so issues with suppliers, termination agreements, that sort of thing. Professional negligence, I whisper that because we're both solicitors and there, but for the grace of God go we. But you know, sometimes professionals get it wrong, and that's why we all have professional indemnity insurance, so professional negligence, and you know, the general large debt recovery claims. And then the other 50% of our practice is insolvency, largely contentious insolvency, although we do some advisory with our transactional teams. So I feel like I've just dumped a whole lot of information on you about what I do.
You do a lot.
And I will pause to let you ask me some
Breathe.
questions.
No, my goodness. Wow. Um, so that is a lot to unpack in there, and that's a really interesting split, the two sort of main, the commercial litigation and the insolvency, um, and the professional negligence, which, as you say, shh, don't talk about that. I am really interested in all of that actually, but I think I personally I'm going to be really, really, so selfish now. Go, I'm really interested in this sort of the family divorce, the company divorce piece around the
Yeah,
shareholders dispute stuff, because I think there's a like anything where there's any sort of marriage or relationship, there's people go into things, it's all lovely and cheerful, and then hopefully some lawyers will have got involved and gone, okay, what you need to do is actually put your paperwork together. But when it goes wrong, I bet, boy, does it go wrong. And
absolutely. And
tell me about that.
yeah, so my first piece of advice to any owner managed businesses, family businesses that I speak with is prevention is better than cure. It is expensive to untangle a dispute, it is much better to get your house in order and have a company check. So first port of call is, are your company documents up to date? Do you even have company documents? We work with a lot of family-owned SMEs, so 1, 2, maybe 3 directors all sharing the shareholding. That's come down through generations. So it may have started out with siblings owning the company, and now it's cousins, and they don't necessarily have the same relationship as those who started the company many, many generations before them. And nobody has looked at the company documents. So it may be that articles of association, which all limited companies have to have, might date back to, I've seen one dating back to the 1930s. And obviously things have moved on substantially since then. So it's getting your company documents up to date, not just the articles of association, but also a shareholders agreement. Is there an agreement that says what shareholders' duties, rights and responsibilities are, and more importantly, what will happen if it goes wrong, so that there's a clear process in place if there's a dispute, if you get to a deadlock, if it's only 2 directors and 50-50 shareholders, nobody's a majority owner of the company, there is a clear procedure in place, because that will make sorting out the dispute, if it ends up in a company divorce as well, so much more cost effective and clearer for everybody. So prevention is always better than cure. I know I'm talking myself out of a job, but I would much rather that clients came and saw my corporate team and got their company documents up to date and in good shape, than coming to me to try and unpick it for them when they're already in a distressed situation. Because litigation, it's hard, it's messy, it's stressful. And I know I deal with it every day, but I'm lucky enough to be a third party in it. I couldn't imagine having to go through that kind of dispute in my own personal life. I mean, heaven forbid that I ever fall out with my partners, touch wood. I can, I can completely see how unbelievably stressful and time consuming and all consuming it is, and that it takes away from the business. It takes the owners and the managers and the the people who are keeping this business afloat. It detracts from their day to day. So it's never a good position to be in. But if you happen to get yourself into that position, getting legal advice, and I would say this, as early as you possibly can, is obviously the first step. And it's having a think about what your budget looks like. So there is quite a lot that directors and shareholders, particularly those who are quite sophisticated, can do by themselves that doesn't require a lawyer. And it may just be that they're using the lawyer for bits and pieces, but they're able to get guidance and do a lot of it themselves in order to keep costs down. And that's the first thing I always explore with my clients. I say, what do you want to get out of this? What does an ideal result look like? Is it a company divorce? Is it you buying the company? Is it you leaving the company? And then how do we get there as quickly and cost effectively as possible? And which bits of this can you do yourself? You don't need to pay me to do this bit, as much as I would love you to. But you can actually do that yourself. So it's a real strategic partnership with a lawyer to work out how you get to where you want to be. But it's the added dynamic, Heledd, that you will be aware of when you're dealing with relatives and when you're dealing with a company that is perhaps the absolute focal point of this entire family, and that comes with so much emotional bearing, because it's been passed down and it's been looked after from generation to generation, and perhaps somebody wants to take it in a different direction, or somebody wants to do something different, and that is where the falling out happens. And as you said, everything's fantastic when we're all friends and we don't need to know what the documents say. But when a fallout happens, and I see it a lot, unfortunately, it's much better to have clear processes in place.
You're absolutely right, because it is that. So from my perspective, I see clients coming in and they're going, right, I've worked in my family business for decades. Now I'm getting to that stage of retiring, and one of my first things, I sit there and go, right, lovely. So we're going to sort out your personal affairs, but let's sort your company papers out. And you're absolutely right. They go, company papers. I think there's something in the safe from 1948 that, you know, my grandfather did. And I'm like, yeah, let's have a look at this. And it is that interesting. It's that, again, it's that human dynamic, isn't it? Where you sit there and go, you know, oh, it's company law, it's quite dry, like private client law is quite dry, but actually there's always people in the middle, and people are able to go off in many different directions. It's a bit like somebody said to me, worst thing about lawyers, and I think this probably applies in any sort of business, is like, it's like herding cats, I said. And he said, no, cats at least stay on the floor. Squirrels, because they go up trees and jump and do this. I'm actually slightly offended, but actually I think you might have a point. And I think, you know, the more you do, the more you come across people, the more you realise people can just go off in spectacular tangents. And our role, I liked what you said about being a third party, is that actually you can take that step back, can't you, and go, look, where do you want to get to? Where do you want to be? You know, let's see what we can do. And yeah, how do you manage that? How do you manage that dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a collaboration, definitely, particularly when you're dealing with family businesses. So it will be across teams. It will be the people like you, Heledd, who are looking after the personal side and the personal wealth and making sure that there's provisions, you know, if they perhaps lose capacity or incapacitated or need care or whatever it is. But then it's also asking the questions, are you a company director? What's happening with your business? Because whilst, you know, and it's not my area at all, so apologies if I get it wrong, whilst there may be, you know, inheritance provisions if you don't necessarily have a will, that won't apply in your company. So for example, a directorship is a personal appointment. It doesn't pass on your death to somebody else. So if your company articles are not up to date and there's a specific quorum that you need in order for the directors to be able to move the company forward, and you haven't put provision in place on your death, then the company could be left in limbo. It doesn't necessarily mean that your directorship will pass in accordance with your will or, you know, automatically pass to somebody else. So it's understanding the difference between sorting out your personal affairs and your company affairs. And while you're getting perhaps a lasting power of attorney for your personal affairs, you should be getting a business lasting power of attorney as well. Because if you're incapacitated, it's not just your family who need to make sure that your personal affairs are looked after, it's your directors as well, if you happen to be a director in a company. Again, what happens to shares on death? How are those transferred? And has provision been made for that in your will? Has provision been made for that in your company? So family-owned businesses, I find, are really, really interesting because there's real scope for collaboration. I think it needs to be collaborative. It can't just be, well, I'm going to go see the company lawyers, or I'm going to go see the private wealth lawyers, or I'm going to go see a litigator to make sure that, you know, it doesn't end up in some sort of a dispute. It is holistically looking at every area of that individual's life. And with family-owned businesses, it's like this, isn't it? It's so intrinsic and it's so difficult to pull all the various pieces out. And that's what makes it really interesting and fun for us lawyers.
Well, it does, doesn't it? Because sometimes you go, oh, there's a thread. Just pull that, and then you go,
Yes.
oh, okay. Suddenly it's all unraveling on me, and you're like, let's take a step back and go. And you can't do it, can you? You can't just sit there and go, well, I'll just deal with this bit, because it is that
Yes.
tapestry of so much getting involved. And you know, and I always think
Mm.
with us lawyers, you know, it doesn't matter how somebody comes in through the door. It's how do you recognise what they need? And you know,
Exactly.
I might get a client come in and goes, oh, you know, I just want to make a basic bill. I go, no, you don't. 'Cause you might want a basic bill, but let me tell you, let me know about your life first. Let's flip it round. And then they go, oh yeah, I've got 5
Yes.
companies and I've got 3 ex-wives, and you know, and children I don't speak to, and they're all shareholders.
Mm.
No, hang on.
Mm.
Stop, pause, reverse. And you know, and for me, a lot of the time, what I find a lot of time doing is people is almost stress testing when there's going to be litigation. When you've got
Mm.
when you know you sit there going, right, we're going to sit down and we're going to do your will, I can count on one hand the number of families I've ever met who are happy completely with their family dynamics. Throw in a
Yeah.
business where
Yeah.
there's an inevitable imbalance, isn't there? There's always somebody who's doing more than the others, or but then it's, oh, but we're all children, we should all be treated equally. Yeah, but they're the ones doing the work. And I'm sitting there going, I can tell you at some point this is going to go horribly wrong, because what you are trying to do is really hard. Not impossible, but hard. And for me, bringing in a
Yeah.
litigator is hugely helpful, because I can sit there and go, right, this person's going to tell you, if you do what you want to do and don't listen to me, this is the outcome. And do you find yourself sort of doing that sort of preemptive stress testing, for want of a better word?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, if we can put measures in place so that they don't end up coming to me and having to spend considerable sums of money, that's in everybody's interests. I mean, the worst thing that can happen, and I've seen it a few times now, and it's quite heartbreaking, is where a director has thought that they have put provisions in place for their family in terms of their company. They've made a will, as you say, they've come to somebody lovely like you, and they've said, want the house to go here, I want the assets to go here, all of that sorted. And they've agreed with their fellow directors in a family-owned company that the shares will then go to the children. But there's been a falling out after the death, and that simply hasn't been honoured, and it was only ever, something to be honoured.
Yeah.
And I was dealing with one family fallout like that, where I knew the director before he passed, and he was, such a lovely man, and absolutely his family meant everything to him, and he was really proud, and he used to tell me all the time, I'm really proud that I've made provision for them, and I know that they're going to be looked after, and all the inheritance is tied up in these companies. And after his passing, it turned nasty with the remaining family members, and we ended up in a massive dispute. And I remember speaking to the children effectively, and they were saying, this is mum's inheritance, this is her house, this is everything. So it's not just we're looking for our windfall. This is actually, can mum continue to live in the house after dad's passing? And you see the best and worst of people in family situations, don't you? I mean, you see it from a really personal perspective, but litigation, even between businesses, there's always emotion involved, and particularly in family businesses. And you really do see the absolute worst of people when a dispute like this arises. And so many times you just think, hindsight's a wonderful thing. If only these documents had been updated, if only this had been put in place, we wouldn't be in this position, spending so much money trying to untangle the mess that's being created. So yeah, I mean, as a litigator, my preference is don't use me if you don't need to. Get your house in order first.
It's a really funny
Obviously,
one.
if you need help, I absolutely will help you, but it's in your interest not to end up coming to see me.
And do you see that these disputes have been rumbling for years and then just spike, or there's some things just gone horribly wrong really quickly?
Yeah, I mean, usually there's some sort of a catalyst. We saw it a lot in COVID. So, and I'm sure you saw it as well on the personal side of things, that COVID was a real trigger for relationships, whether they're personal relationships, everybody being locked down together, or, businesses being put under huge amounts of stress during the pandemic. And putting relationships, business or personal relationships, under a microscope, and then all tensions that may have been in the background really are magnified because of a pandemic, or some sort of trauma that's happened. So yes, sometimes they've been rumbling for a while, but normally it's because a change in the directorship, or there has been some huge change within the business. They've lost a big client, or somebody wants to take the business in a different dynamic, or just a personal falling out. Sometimes it's a case of, our personal partners fell out at a family event last week, and now we can't work together anymore. I have seen that before. So yeah, I mean, as I said, people are surprising. It's none of these disputes are exactly the same, and people continually surprise me, even though I deal with these on a day-to-day
I
basis.
know. I mean, the one that I had coming at it from the private client side was we had a phone call, and it was two brothers in farming partnership, and one killed the other one.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh. Okay. I mean, again, people surprise me. I have
People
not heard that one yet.
yeah. And it was, so you had a, partnership, of course, no paperwork whatsoever, been in the farm into, generations, heat of the moment. We have one dead partner and one on bail who's not allowed within 30 miles of the business. And the
Wow.
utter, I know, I mean, you couldn't make this up, could you? The utter chaos that just ensued from not only the trauma of that, the family issues, but actually it was a farm. They don't stop. They don't stop operating. They don't stop needing things doing, contract signing, things renewing. And we just could not move fast enough to get anything done. And, it was like team of us just frantically going, right, what can we do? I think it was a dairy herd. So like, we need to find people who can actually now milk a herd of cows. Not, one of these things they don't teach you in law school.
Well, quite.
And you're like,
I bet.
Okay. And
Yeah.
it was, and it was such an eye opener. From you get one of those like days where you go, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to have quite a peaceful day this morning. My diary's quite clear. Boom. Not anymore. It's not.
Yeah.
And devastation is the only thing I can say. That we watched a successful business just disintegrate overnight. And the sort of devastation of that was incredible. And like I say, we just could not move fast enough with everybody trying their very best. It wasn't even a dispute. The dispute obviously resulted in very tragic circumstances, but the consequences of that dispute were immense, weren't they? And I think sort of how when you're in the middle of a dispute in litigation, how do you keep the business going? How do you keep that running?
Exactly.
Because you've got shareholders, you've got people who wait, employees, you've got people who need this, to keep going. So how can you balance it? Is it possible?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's unbelievably stressful for those involved, and that's part of initial conversations I have, which is what does the end result, what does a good result look like for you? Is it you leaving, you staying, the company dissolving? Because those really are probably the only options if the relationship is broken down to such an extent that you can't work together anymore. So what does that look like, and how do we get there as quickly and cost effectively as possible? And how can I support you with these bits over here so that you can get on with the day-to-day running of the business? And also just having some really sensible, practical conversations, which is, I know that tensions are very high, and I know that you want your day in court, and I know you want this, but this is what it's going to cost. This is how long it's going to take. This is the drain it's going to be to your business. We can absolutely do that if you want, but you need to weigh that up over potentially this kind of compromise, this isn't absolutely what you want, but it's going to get you to where you need to be much quicker, and it's going to be much more cost effective. And I think, as you know, I'm not a fan of legal TV dramas, because I think that they just give young people who are thinking of coming into law just completely the wrong expectations. And I absolutely blame Ally McBeal and LA Law for why am I here today, and I've not experienced any of the bits of those TV shows. Um, but I think it sort of puts the idea in people's head that I want my day in court. You know, I want a judge to hear and I want a judge to decide and I want justice. And I absolutely, justice is incredibly important. But sometimes with these commercial business disputes, it's weighing up what that cost is personally and professionally and to the business over what a compromise might look like.
Talking, my day in court is, as you say, what I object. I've never said that I object in my life, but I'd like to.
So
I'd like to bring that into my day-to-day legal. To have like bingo cards, things we should be allowed to say because I saw it on telly.
yes, and the gavel. Don't forget that
Yes,
gavel.
gotta have a gavel. Uh, but I think you mentioned the day in court. I think actually that can be quite helpful because I think if it's on paper and you keyboard warrioring to an extent, and actually if you go to a court and they have to stand in front of a judge, I think sometimes it clicks. I don't know what you think. Whether sometimes actually that gravity of a court hearing sometimes is that shove they need.
Yes, I mean, it's hugely expensive to have the day in court. And there are certainly more cost-effective ways of feeling heard by a third party and trying to work through it. So obviously, alternative dispute resolution is always something that I look at really early on. And it may be that those who want to be heard and want to have somebody who isn't acting for them or against them, somebody who's completely independent and unbiased, listen to them. It may just be that they need a mediator, which is obviously far more cost effective than actually paying for court time and using up court resources. So if the parties can resolve it some other way, that's always best for all concerned, except for the lawyers, of course. But we're not here to line our coffers. It's better for court, it's better for access to justice, it's better for the business as a whole. So absolutely, those who want their day in court, I always try and signpost them towards mediation, which will give them hopefully the same sense of being heard and having their voice heard, and not just through, as you say, the keyboard warrior lawyers sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the move to mediation and alternate dispute resolution has got to be the right answer, hasn't it? Because it's like, as you say, you know what?
Yeah.
I'll happily go to court, and I'm very happy to go to court, and you can come to court with me, and if you want to pay me, then let's do it. But let's stop and think: do you really want this? And so
Yeah.
the idea of mediation, but sometimes it's just not possible, is it? Sometimes you just get to that point where everybody is so entrenched, and you go, the only person who's going to get through this is a judge. And
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But the courts have now got to the point where they are able to order mediation, and we know that we've seen compulsory mediation coming out of the courts. It's only as good as those who are participating in it and not just paying lip service to it. But I think that that's incredibly important. But also it's making clients aware that this will now be in the public domain. So there will be a judgment written. And if you don't come across well, you could be criticized in that judgment and it could be damaging to your reputation. Whereas in mediation, everything is confidential and privileged. So you're able to say exactly what you feel like saying to the mediator, whereas you can't necessarily say that in open court. So I think it's making clients aware of that again, if you're trying to save your business or you're the one who wants to stay in the business, are you really going to put it out there in the public domain that there's a huge dispute, and how's that going to affect your shareholding and your relationship with suppliers and all that sort of thing?
that just had not occurred to me because the work I do in the court protection, everything's anonymized.
Yes.
So
yes.
You can do all the sort of having having it out. It just
Yeah.
hadn't occurred to me that in ordinary litigation, your name's there, you're out there.
Absolutely, and it can destroy careers. I have seen some judgments that have given feedback on witnesses that has meant that those people have literally had to go to the other side of the world.
Wow.
And you just think, why did you go and put that in the public domain? Yeah.
And it's there forever. I mean,
it's there forever.
It is there forever. It's not like it's not a sort of newspaper chip paper thing, is it? It's there's
Yeah,
this court case that actually might be used again and again as precedent. Um,
exactly.
yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. I mean, that's got to be. I think that's an incentive. I wouldn't want my, it's that proper airing your dirty laundry in public.
Quite. And it costs a lot to do that. Whereas
Yeah,
mediation, I feel like you get most of the benefits, which is being heard, hopefully trying to reach a resolution and being completely honest and frank, with it still being confidential. A bit like what you're saying about court protection work.
yeah. Yeah, I think we all know people want their voices heard, and I know that
Yes.
as lawyers, we sort of people tell us things, and you have to listen to an awful lot. And then you have to go, and I need to pick up the bits I need and apply the law to it,
Mm.
which isn't necessarily the bits you're telling me. And that can be quite frustrating, can't it, when you're working with clients in a dispute space where you go, I understand all this, but the legal piece is quite small. We've got all this going on, and this is tiny.
That's right. But I think our jobs, particularly as a litigator, is to look at the wider picture. And that's why I always start with what looks like a good result for you. And sometimes it is about, a reputational issue. So it's, I've been accused of doing this in the business. I absolutely haven't. I've got a reputation in this marketplace for doing X, Y, Z, and I want it on the record that, I've been fully atoned and I never did that kind of thing. So sometimes it's not even about, I want to stay in the business, I want to leave the business, I want the business to be broken up. There's something else that's driving the client there, and it won't be a good result for the client unless they get that sense of satisfaction. So it might not be a legal point at all. It might be, well, actually, isn't it quicker, easier, better for everybody involved if you just buy this or get paid this to leave? They won't feel like they have had value until they get that piece of satisfaction. So it's understanding what drives the client and what they need to get out of this for this to have been a good result for them. And I have had that before, and I've cautioned against it, and I've said, what you put out there in the public domain is there forever. Thankfully, it went in the client's favor, and actually it was really, really important to them. And they were entirely right. It was really important for their business as well. It could have gone horribly wrong. Luckily, it didn't. But that is something that a client has to do as part of their own risk assessment and their commercial viability testing and all those sorts of things.
I think that is important, isn't it? Because we can only do so much as lawyers. We can advise, we can guide, and we work within the confines of the law, but you wouldn't need litigation if it was clear cut. So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think there's always going to be a point where you go, we've tried everything, but this justice point that you mentioned earlier, actually, we need to get to that point. We have got this mechanism and we do need to get there. But I'm completely with you. I think any sensible person who talks about it, tries to sort it out, has to be the right answer. But there is that backstop, and that's what we're here for, aren't we? To go, well, if this is what we need to do.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's the right thing to do. And if the client's making an informed decision about that, if they know the risks, the cost, the time, and everything else, and that's what they choose, then it's entirely their decision. So, we can only support them, but it has to be informed. They have to know what the alternatives are, of getting an outcome that they might be able to live with. And that's the other thing about litigation is it's never exactly what a client wants. Sometimes they say in dispute resolution, in alternative dispute resolution, a good result is one where neither party is happy because they both had to compromise, and that is normally what happens. It's very rare to get exactly what you want in litigation, just as it is in life.
Just as it is in life. Well, I think on that note, we're absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Loved it. Yeah, I learned stuff. I like
I
learning
learn
stuff,
stuff too.
which is good. Which is good. Juliet Schalker, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for coming on.